wouldn't be surprised even if someone as young as Rishabh Pant in the next 2 years decides to forgo one format.
Which format?
I mean, oof, you've heard it here first, folks.
Back we are on ESPN Cricinfo Runorder. Now, Ben Stokes' rather unexpected retirement from ODI cricket has forced us to see if the bigger picture is under threat right now. Is this the beginning of the end of all format players? Most teams are happy to field two simultaneous white ball teams, and we shall discuss what the dark and desperate future of the white ball game holds ahead of us. The last of the all format writers are here, Firdaus Munda and Osman Samiuddin, and the regulars, of course, Dustin Salgado and Gaurav Sundaraman. It's a very warm welcome back to George Binoy. We have got a big question on our hands. What is the future when it comes to all format cricketers? Are we going to see lesser and lesser endangered species? Osman, take it away.
Oh, okay. It's difficult to say. I spoke to we were speaking to some ICC officials, which is handy for the show. We were speaking to some ICC officials last week. We put this question to them about player workload and how they could handle stuff and how so many are leaving different formats. And Jeff Allardyce said that it's something that's been happening for as long as he's been at the ICC, which in a way is correct. You had players leaving tests or leaving ODIs. Maybe 10, 15 years ago. Nobody spoke about Tamim Iqbal, for example, leaving T20s, or not many people did.
A lot of this is watched in Bangladesh. So I'm just letting you know, they'd be shocked that, what do you mean no one spoke of Tamim retirement? It covered.
They all did. Firdaus will tell you shortly, I'm sure, that Quinton de Kock left Test cricket a little while ago also. So these are big names. Ben Stokes obviously is one of the biggest. He's a World Cup winner as well, and he's left that format. Just one last caveat on this would be that the last couple of years have been particularly crazy, but that's because we're playing COVID catch-up. So schedules are all playing COVID catch-up, and so it's become very hectic for a lot of players. And rightly so, somebody like Ben Stokes has pulled out.
Is it a bad thing though? I mean, are we all looking at this as, it'll be a tragedy for the game if we don't have all format players? Should we turn it around and say, well, it's okay. We'll get more and more players. Teams are happy to field competitive, simultaneous white ball teams. It's not such a big deal, Firdaus.
Yeah, I think possibly it's not such a big deal, and possibly you'll see more opportunities given to more people. I just want to say, from the perspective of a country like South Africa, who don't actually play that much cricket relatively to India or England, you're finding that players are not really, apart from Quinton de Kock, and he had his reasons, including fatherhood, which I remember at the time thinking was really fantastic considering the absentee father syndrome we have in our country. But I think countries like that, maybe several other nations who are not playing as much cricket, you're going to find it more and more difficult for them to split their teams. And also, if South Africa was to field a test squad and a white ball squad and maybe an ODI and a T20 squad, I don't actually think they'd have the players. And you'd probably find that in several other countries as well.
So my point of view is that, when a player is young and he's in his early to mid 20s or even his late 20s, he's happy to play all formats, He's in a stage of life where, cricket is his priority. But then you enter a stage of life later on, and as other things begin to take priority, like your family comes into the picture and all of that. And then players aren't willing to give 100% of their time, every month, every week to cricket anymore. And they want a little more balance. And like how we all do in our professional lives. Your early 30s is probably the prime of a cricketer's career, like as a batsman or a bowler. And then you lose out on watching a lot of cricketers in the prime of their careers if they're going to have to pick between formats. And that's where I think the fan will lose out.
Does the fan actually, or does the viewer actually lose out on much, GS, if we do not see another Kohli at his peak, or a Steve Smith, or a Jasprit Bumrah, or a Kagiso Rabada who play every format?
Yeah, it's actually coming to that point. You gave a good lead in there. So even now, if you actually take each and every team, you'll only find like one or two players who are part of all three formats regularly, right? Mm-hmm. And one of the reasons, Ronak, is that the skill sets required for T20 and tests are now slowly, you can see a wide difference in the two skill sets. And we've been discussing a lot about current players. So let's take a player who's at 18, 19 currently, who's trying to get into the international setup. What is his easiest route? So you dream of being a cricketer. What are your goals? You want to play for the country. Now, what is the easiest path to that? A lot of people who make the test squad from the T20 route. in my view, that when you start practicing at a young age, I think it's easier to get into these leagues or easier to play T20 cricket, do extremely well there. And then that's an entry into your national team or international team or whatever. And then you kind of realize that, hey, I don't have the skills for test cricket. So why do I have to focus on that? And all of you are talking about money and making ends meet, etc. I think in 3-4 years, if you're a very good T20 cricketer, I think you might earn more than what an international cricketer earns. I don't think money is going to be that much of a challenge, other than actually being extremely skilled, focused, and try to build that skill set. So that is the reason why we might see less all-format players, which is already the case.
Dustin, throw us a curveball, will you?
No, I think you were talking about sort of the fans wanting to see those all-format players. But I think at least for teams like, say, India and Australia, the fans kind of don't say that anyway. For example, Virat Kohli, since the last T20 World Cup, he's played 5 T20s. Bumrah, Rohit and Kohli together have played, I think, 1 ODI since the last World Cup. And I actually think that, there's also a question, especially when it comes to teams like India and Australia, of fairness, in that you have players who are kind of not all-format players, but then they jump straight into World Cups. Like Cummins and Stark will probably do for Australia, Kohli will for India. And there's actually guys who have been playing more of those formats for their countries in the cycle between World Cups. And there's a question of how long can you kind of push those guys out of the World Cup squads and say, hey, we have these superstars who will just fly in straight for the World Cup, because they're actually not able to manage the workload of all formats anyway.
So around the room then, is this really the doom apocalypse for all format players that the title may suggest, or is it okay, we'll be fine and it doesn't really matter if we don't see all format players? Around the room, one last word. George, with you first.
Yeah. So I do think teams will have players who are good enough to play all formats within their own country's talent pool. But all of them will not be able to play all formats all the time, and they'll pick and choose the high-profile series that they want to play. And therefore, the lower-profile series that the teams are part of will become even less appealing to the viewer. And, it just feeds into this spiral of making certain cricket events less appealing for people to watch.
I would like to be that you have maybe 4 to 5 months of the year which are set for leagues, and the leagues get played in that time, and that's when the sort of red ball players are either playing domestic cricket or that's their time off or whatever the case might be. And then you've got another section of the year, and it would have to be carefully planned, right? I think with that period, some of it has to be reserved for long format cricket. And then I think as a result of that, you're going to see ODIs, although I still think they make a lot of money, and they continually will do that because they have such a long day. You can fit a lot of advertising into an ODI. But presumably that will start to fade away, and we'll see that maybe at World Cups only.
I don't see anything really changing in the next 4 or 5 years. I still stand by the fact that I think ODIs will become less and less relevant, and they'll be kind of squeezed in and dropped out of the calendar accordingly for whenever people want to fit in their leagues or whatever. I just see the inertia is far too strong for any change for any real change to happen. I think in the next 4 or 5 years. Gradually we keep changing things, but not in the next 4 or 5 years.
Okay, GS.
I'm with Osman. I think 3-4 years is because of the FTP and all it's been done. They'll have to kind of justify all those things. So maybe from 2027 onwards, you'll see a radical shift. And players will just not be able to have the skill to play all 3 formats.
Dustin.
Yeah, I think for the big 3 teams, India, England and Australia, you're going to see more and more of these retirements from one format. I wouldn't be surprised even if someone as young as Rishabh Pant in the next 2 years decides to forgo one format.
Which format?
Oof, you've heard it here first, folks.
It's a crazy world. It could be one without all format players, which may or may not be a good thing. Time will tell. Thank you very much. Osman Samiuddin, Firdaus Munda, George Benoy, Gaurav Sundaraman and Dustin Silva.